Marvel versus DC, who will win the battle overall? In this video, I want to cover the marketing strategies that both of them have used, some of the things that have failed, some that have succeeded, and then talk about who's winning right now, but also who's going to win long term. I'm Jesse with Inspire Video Marketing, where I show you how to inspire with your video and make a great living while doing it. Now, quick disclaimer, I am a pretty big fan of comic book type movies, superhero movies, but just to give you a little background, and because I know a lot of people are going to watch this and think maybe I'm biased, I grew up watching DC comic characters, so Superman, Batman, all those guys. And then as far as Marvel goes, I watched the X-Men cartoons growing up, but I never was really big into the comic books on either side, but definitely I would say slanted a little more towards DC, so if you think I'm biased, maybe I am. So first of all, obviously, as far as where we're at right now, we could just look at the box office numbers. I mean, overall, Marvel has made a lot more money than DC, simply for the fact that they've just made more movies. Now, there's a marketing lesson to be learned right there. Make more movies that are at least profitable, and you're probably gonna make more money. But of course, there has to be a level of quality with that if you're gonna be successful with those products, or in this case, the movie is the product. So while DC has made a pretty big splash recently with movies like Wonder Woman and of course Aquaman, and I got a feeling Shazam will be one of those. We'll talk more about all those newer movies in a little bit. Overall, I think we have to say Marvel's probably won that battle just with the amount of movies they've had that just crushed it in the theaters with the box office numbers. In this video, I'm going to break down the different strategies both Marvel and DC have used, and the ones that have worked best for both, and who I think is going to win the war overall because of it. So first of all, when it comes to your strategy, you got to have a good product in any type of business. Well, in the case of Marvel versus DC with the movies, the product is the movie. Now, along with that, there's a lot of things that, could be sold, like merchandise, and of course, like action figures are a big part of that. But a lot of that comes back to how the movies do, right? So the product itself has to be really good. And if it's not, word spreads. So with that being said, obviously there's been a couple of the movies from Marvel's side that haven't performed as well as most of them. But overall, for the most part, almost all of them have been considered really good movies, done well critically, or at least pretty good critically, and box office wise, crushed it, right? So that critical opinion, the fan opinion, and just the numbers they do in the box office is gonna affect the perception people have on it, and from that, a lot of marketing can be produced. And that's the same with any product, right? If it's a good product, it's a lot easier for word to spread about it. Now, on the DC side of things, obviously they've had a few that bombed pretty bad. Let's just be honest. There's a bunch of the movies like Batman versus Superman, or that wasn't really critically all that good. And then also, of course, Justice League. Let's be honest, that wasn't a very good movie in terms of box office, reviews from critics or fans. So word spread about that, and I think once it came out into theaters, a lot of it was the fact that people were seeing it and it wasn't very good, and now because of that, less people came to see it, and now it doesn't do as well. So, when we're talking marketing strategy, the product itself, or the movies themselves in this instance, are number one. Now, that being said, the actual marketing in itself is huge, because some of these movies weren't super critically acclaimed, and the fans didn't think they were the best movies ever, but they still killed it. A lot of this comes back to the differences in the overall strategies between Marvel and DC. When you talk about Marvel, it's very clear that they have a very clear vision about where they want all the movies to go as far as how they fit with each other. More on that in a second. But besides that, especially having a clear vision for each movie. And one of the things I think they do really well is they have Kevin Feige at the helm for all the movies, having an idea, okay, this is, what each movie is, this is how it fits into our larger universe. And from that, he could say, we have to make sure we have these details in place and all that, that it fits in the storyline, and there's no little elements that happen within a movie that don't fit up with the timeline or other parts of the story, contradicting. But from there, he lets the director do their thing. The director can have a clear vision, okay, this is what we need to do. And for the most part, there's not a ton of interference from Kevin Feige. So within the parameters they're giving, they can go ahead and execute a vision that they have, and there isn't as much interference. On the DC side of things, this is where things really went sour early, was at the helm they had, Warner Brothers, a lot of different shuffling up at top, so there wasn't a clear vision there as for how the whole universe would work together. But then on top of that, you would have these directors that kept getting changed, right, with the scripts with a lot of these different movies. And on top of that, like when they still had Zack Snyder doing, basically being the main guy, and he was doing Batman versus Superman and Justice League, right? You had all these other upper people in Warner Brothers saying, okay, well, we want to change this now, and we want to change this, and we want to change this. And things got really kind of convoluted, and the stories got switched around, and there was all these mixed sort of vibes throughout the movie, and it just didn't have a clear vision. Now, again, all that comes back to having, clear vision from the top, and then from there, letting your director do their thing. And I think that's one of the big missteps that happened early with DC. And that's something important for any company. You have to have a clear vision of where the company is going, and everyone having a clear understanding below the leaders of the company, what their role is and what they need to do, and then let them, give them that vision and let them execute on it the way they know best. And a lot of this with DC also came back to them being a little more reactionary. So just as a whole, Marvel, you could tell they've this is what we're gonna do. We already know 20 years what our big goal is and have a general idea of what we're gonna do to get to that point. Whereas DC overall just seemed like a lot more reactionary, right? They kind of jumped right into doing Batman versus Superman, which was borderline a team-up movie. And then they also just jumped right into doing Justice League without having all the individual character movies. You got your movie with Superman, and then from there, they basically just jumped right into Batman versus Superman, threw Wonder Woman in there, right? And it was just too much going on too quick. It didn't allow you to really develop your individual quote-unquote products, being your individual superheroes and their movies. So when you brought them together, it would make you want to see all these superheroes team up that you've seen their individual movies. And when they all come together, it's that much bigger of a spectacle. But if all of a sudden you just throw a character in there without doing that extra step, it kind of makes things a little bit less powerful. It makes it less unique. And it doesn't draw as many people in because, with Marvel, you've seen, okay, I've seen the Black Panther movie. I've seen Captain Marvel. So everyone's going to want to go see Avengers Endgame because now they want to see all these characters come together on screen. And obviously they did this way back with the first Avengers movie. So that's really important in any type of marketing. You don't want to just oh, someone else is doing this, I'm going to do this too. No, you have to have an understanding of what your company is about, what your product's about. And I think Marvel has really excelled at that. And I think DC is starting to get to the point now where they're realizing, okay, we need to make our individual characters, stand out, make them pop. We need to have a clear vision for where they're going to go and not worry so much about what Marvel's doing and what's working for them. They were just playing a little bit too much, I think, of trying to play catch up. Now, this isn't me saying DC is worse than Marvel as far as, their comics or their movies, but let's be honest. Some of their first movies weren't as good. It feels like they're starting to hit their stride a little bit more now, and I think it's going to start to be a little bit more of an equal competition, though. Next, with your marketing strategy, you got to talk about the media, the news, or just the word that's getting out there, right? So, Marvel, they almost always, when something comes out news-wise, it's either controversial or something positive. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But they always, when they're getting something out to the press, it's super calculated. It's, they have an understanding of how, again, everything fits into with the larger Marvel universe, and they're really keeping in mind how people are going to perceive that news. Now, on the DC side of things, there's been a lot of leaks and things that came out that weren't necessarily positive, right? Talking about people knowing about, okay, now there's these last minute changes happening in the movie from Warner Brothers, and the directors having to totally do all these reshoots that weren't planned, and they're changing the tone of the movie and all this, right? And when that gets out to the news, that makes people kind of worry, is this movie gonna be good, right? And when people have that little bit of worry, they might just wait for it to come out on DVD or to streaming or whatever the case may be to watch it. That's gonna, really hurt their box office numbers. Also, with that news coming out that, they're maybe having a hard time finding directors for these different movies, or that they're changing their minds constantly about what movies they're gonna do, or that the script is getting rewritten, or, oh, this movie might come out and then it keeps getting pushed back. Little things like that happen over and over and over all come back from not having that clear vision, right? And when that happens in the movies, before they even come out, word spreads. So before the movie even comes out, now you're kind of I don't know, it sounds like this movie's on the rocks. Sounds like there's been a lot of changes. Sounds like they're not really sure what they're doing. Again, that doesn't really lead to a lot of confidence that the movie's gonna be good. Honestly, personally, I'm, again, more of a DC fan, growing up, but before Batman versus Superman came out, I'm this is gonna be the greatest movie ever. Even if it's terrible, I'm gonna say that. Just because, I'm a fanboy, right? But being honest, when it came out, I had a little bit of doubt from everything I was hearing. And then when it did come out and I went and I saw it, I was like, I'm still gonna call it the greatest movie ever, but let's be honest, it wasn't very good. So the fanboy in me wanted to be like, yeah, this is a great movie, but like, again, all those shifts in direction and tonality and all that, I already had my doubts going into it. And then now that's affecting my perception going into the movie because I'm looking for those little things, right? So the news that gets out there affects your perception of the actual product or the actual movie. Again, Marvel does a much better job of saying, you know, we have a clear vision, this is what we're doing, this is where we're going. And from there, when you go see the movies, almost all the time you're confident, like, you know, Marvel does their thing, it's gonna be good. So you're not really looking for all the little holes in the plot or the little like character development issues and things like that nearly as much. You're not putting it under the microscope. You're just sitting back, eating your popcorn and enjoying the movie and expecting it to be good. That shift in perception is huge though. And that's something that doesn't just happen with movies, that happens with any type of marketing. Now, one way DC tried to be really different from Marvel is they try to, again, jump in really quickly into more of the team-up style movies without developing the individual characters. That was probably a misstep. But one of the ways I think they've really done a great job of trying to do something different is actually something Marvel has done pretty well too. Marvel did like Guardians of the Galaxy, which at the time for like a superhero movie was completely different, right? Because it's in outer space and the characters are kind of weird. You got a talking tree and a talking raccoon, and it's geared more towards adults, adolescents, you know, and not little kids. Something like that, like 10 years ago, even before it came out, a couple years ago, people would have been like, I don't know if that's going to be very good. And it was awesome, right? Well, DC is doing a great job of this themselves now with coming up with movies like Aquaman, which I've always thought it would be an awesome movie. I mean, what could be more visually entertaining and exciting and different than a movie that takes place mostly underwater? I always thought the idea of it was cool. I know Aquaman was always kind of like this joke of a character, but like the idea of a movie executed well always sounded cool to me. And when the movie came out, it was huge, right? Because they had a clear vision of something that was different, but it had a clear vision. They let the director do his thing, and they also had, you know, a really different sort of a movie. It was something that no one had really seen before. So the execution was there, the quality was there, there was a little bit of innovation, something a little different, something interesting. And the end result was a great movie. Same thing with Wonder Woman, right? Before they came out with Captain Marvel from the DC or from the Marvel side, DC went out and they said, hey, let's go do a movie finally, you know, a big blockbuster movie that's got a female lead. Boom, crushed it, right? First big superhero movie, at least of the modern generation, to come out with a female lead. Had a little bit different vibe, actually a lot different vibe, right, from any of the other movies that have been out up to that point with the story and all that. Had a clear vision. And that was a huge winner. I think they're going to be doing the same thing with Shazam as well. I got a feeling that's going to be a really different, fun movie. Just completely different from any type of superhero movie we've seen. I mean, it's a kid that's a superhero movie. I'll be honest, I don't know anything about Shazam, but when I saw the first preview, I was like, this looks sweet. Superhero fan or not, like, I think it's a movie that anyone could enjoy. So I think they're doing a really good job of coming up with unique, you know, movies, just basing them off of the awesome characters they have. Some of them that maybe not as many people know, like Batman and Superman, and saying, hey, let's roll with this. Let's see what we can do with it, and allowing the director to put out a clear vision for it. So I think that's been one of the biggest wins. Now, one of the final big marketing strategies that I think Marvel has excelled in is something that they did with both Captain Marvel and with Black Panther. You can see more about what that strategy is and how they used it in this YouTube video. Hit that subscribe button and the bell icon to catch the newest videos, and I'll see you in that video next.